Greetings, everybody. Welcome to my next tutorial. This is Josie from JHI, and this particular tutorial was inspired by Kaplan University students who I've had quite a few contact me going, help me understand data types, please. So, this tutorial is for you. Let us start out with the skinny. Data types, when you're first presented with them, can seem like abstract concepts that make little to no sense, and it's confusing, especially if you've never run across them before. If you have ever sat down in front of Visual Basic, felt nervous about declaring a variable as a particular data type, then this tutorial is for you. I am going to break down these most common data types, explain what they are, and when to use them. So let's take a look at the common types that we're looking at. We're looking at the Boolean, it all depends on where you're from as to what you're going to call it, the decimal, the double, the integer, the long, and the string. Well, this is all good. Now, let's take a look at them closer. I'm actually going to go from the easiest to the hardest. So, which is easy? In our case, the easiest is the Boolean. It has a value of either true or false. Literally, that's it. True, false. True, false. True, false. That's all that the Boolean deals with. What's next? The string. String is a fun data type because it can store characters and numbers. In fact, it is the only data type that can store and hold letters and characters as well as numbers. Consider it the Visual Basic versions of Notepad. What you put down is what you get. Notepad isn't going to do math for you. It isn't going to do anything but store the string of characters that you have put down. Well, gee, Josie, I get that. Well, honestly, those two aren't the big issue. The confusion that has been brought to my attention, and I've noticed it myself, is that most people get confused when dealing with numbers. So, let's look at that. But before we do, let's actually take it even simpler. Let's look at it from the perspective of numbers with a decimal point that you see, and numbers without a decimal point. So, what first? So, what about the numbers that don't have a decimal? Well, if you're dealing with a number that's no longer or never going to have a decimal in it, you have two choices. You've got the integer and the long. And what's the difference? It's a pretty easy difference to see. I mean, take a look. It's based on the number that it can store. So, looking at the integer, you will see that it can store a number between negative 2,147,483,648 to the positive 2,147,483,647. That's a pretty large number range, but sometimes numbers can go above that. If that happens to be the case, for example, if you subtract 1 from the smallest number or you add 1 to the largest number, you enter the realm of the long data type. Now, bear with me, this is an extraordinarily long number. So, in this case, the smallest number it can handle is a negative 9 sextillion, 223 quintillion, 372 quadrillion, 36 trillion, 854,775,808. To the positive 9 sextrillion, 223 quintillion, 372 quadrillion, 36 trillion, 854,775,807. That is an extraordinarily long number. A very, very, very big range. And more than likely, you're not going to end up using long very often when you're starting out in VB. Now, there is another data type called short, but it's not always introduced in the starter courses in VB, so I'm not going to go over it here. Just know that it does exist, and it handles a number range even smaller than integer. Okay, so what about numbers with decimals? What do we do then? Well, when you're dealing with numbers that have a decimal, I'm talking about percentages. I'm talking about using pi to calculate circumferences. I'm talking about money. When we talk about any number that involves a decimal value, that more or less meaning the numbers that show up on the right-hand side of the decimal, and those numbers have importance, like representing cents, as the case may be, then you are dealing with the data type double and decimal. Now there is, again, another one called single, but it's not always introduced to starters, so I'm not going to go over it here. Just know it exists. So when do you use which? Honestly, the answer lies in which you're using the number 4. Doubles usually are used with dealing with cash, money, and moolah. I say usually because there are some exceptions to that case, but you can research and find out what those exceptions are. I've also found that it works brilliantly with percentages. Why? Because remember, 80% is the same thing as 0.80. 33% is the same thing as 0.33. It's a decimal. Well, it can be converted into a decimal, I should say, and mean exactly the same thing. So, what happens when you use the data type called decimal? This data type is very special, very, 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 very unique. For one, it can handle a decimal value where there are 28 places to the right, this way, of the decimal point, which is showing up right there. All the way to the right, 28 places to the right. It can handle that. So, for example, using numbers like pi, 3.14, lots of numbers afterwards that they're still calculating in order to find the end value of pi. Yeah, you can pretty much use a very accurate representation of pi by just using the decimal. And in fact, that's pretty much one of the few times I've really seen decimals used in a starter VB course. Generally speaking, you're not going to use decimal very much. I will state this, though. The decimal is special in the fact that if you take this decimal point and you move it all the way to the end down here, so it's on this side, you can actually have a number in the octillions. Now keep in mind that long went into the sextillions. After the sextillions, you've got the septillions. Then you've got the octillions. This tells you the number range that the decimal value can actually handle. Incredible? Yes. Just keep in mind you probably won't use it, but it is there in case you need to use it. And now, onto some very important information. Here's the dealio. This little tutorial is literally the very tip of the iceberg. This is the simplest way of looking at data types. And believe me, there is a lot more to it. There's even more data types than what I've gone into. But when you're just starting out and you just want a quick, easy kind of, okay, what am I dealing with here? This tutorial is perfect for it. If, however, programming is going to be your forte and what you push your degree in while at Kaplan University, then you need to take the time and really look at the data types. You need to understand what happens when you take some of these data types and you start pushing past them. Like if you have an integer, for example, and you do some kind of mathematical equation which takes it above the number that you have actually set. Or what I should say that the maximum integer can handle. I mean, what happens when you go above that? What happens to the number? Does it bring an exception? Well, I don't know. You tell me. These are things that you got to look into. Some things cast well between each other. Some things don't. Some things take up more space in the memory. Some things don't. I mean, there's an awful lot more to data types than meets the eye. This, like I said, is just the very tip of it. And with that, I want to say thank you to the students of Kaplan University who've inspired me to write this little tutorial and to Shadows for making sure that it was everything it could be. He pointed out I missed something. So, if you have comments, questions, suggestions, you found that I missed something, or you think I should do a tutorial on something, please, by all means, leave a comment on my site or on the YouTube channel or send me an email. And again, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this has been a very informative tutorial as well as exciting. Well, as exciting as tutorial videos can be, where you're just seeing these little pictures and slideshows pass by. But, you know, hey, all I can do is try. Hopefully it's been a good thing for you, and yeah, I will speak with you at the next tutorial. Have a good one.